Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot.
They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him."
At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you're looking for?"
Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him."
Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned towards him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God."
Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning. Yeah, there we go. I'm Zack.
And I am Paola.
So we are house church leaders here among a variety of other roles that we've had over the last 3 years. And we have the privilege of kicking off the season of Eastertide. So Easter is actually ranges 40 to 50-ish days, depending on where you start. But it's around 40 days where we celebrate the entire season of Easter, like Anderson was highlighting before the worship time. And it is actually marked by the practice of Sabbath. So if you don't practice Sabbath, this is an excellent time to start. It would be an excellent time to begin, especially communally. It doesn't have to be a heavy thing. Sabbath is actually, I think, a good embodiment of what Pastor Josh was talking about last week, moving from the burden of holiness to the gift of holiness. A lot of people, when they think of Sabbath, that's probably the biggest thing they think of is, this is going to be difficult and is burdensome to implement into my daily life. Ironically, stressing out in order to rest. It's a lot more about structure, though, and a lot less about strictness. It's a lot less about forced fun. We've all been there. Your mom or your dad is like, "We're going to go have fun." And you're like, "Ooh, no, we are not." And it's more about real rest. And it will look quite different depending on your age, your stage of life, and your family situation. A Sabbath rest for a single person, maybe in their 20s, will look completely different for parents in their 30s of 3 very active daughters. However, since one of our values as a community is rest, Sabbath is a really beautiful thing to lean into. And I would really highly recommend, maybe at this time, this season, thinking of ways to practice a communal Sabbath rhythm or routine. So something doesn't have to be the whole day or the whole time, but maybe there's a meal that you could be sharing as a house church, maybe as a friend group, maybe as a family. There's a communal rhythmic touch point that you keep week to week. That would be a shared joy as well as a built-in measure of accountability. If this is your first time kind of practicing that, it's a way of sharing this burden of getting into working out this new muscle that you're leaning into.
And as we begin the season of Easter, Eastertide, we are going to be walking through these encounters with Jesus as he rose from the grave and he is meeting his followers in real life, flesh and bone. This encounter with Mary is the first one of those encounters, and it's a beautiful and a deeply intimate encounter. And opposed to what we might expect, the risen Jesus encountering someone full of knowledge, strong faith, conviction, he meets a woman that is confused, in a lot of pain, after witnessing the one who saw her, called her, set her free. That man being brutally murdered just a couple days ago. So emotions are all over the place. And she's there, confused, in pain. That's the one that Jesus chose to encounter. That's noteworthy because he is revealing himself to someone who, in her suffering, in her pain, in her confusion, is choosing to keep seeking, going back, even if it doesn't make sense. She continues to seek Jesus. So yes, Eastertide is a season of celebration. As I read not too long ago, a season of practicing resurrection, which means living in hope, gratitude, joy, pressing on new creation. Even though what we see around us is chaos and darkness, we practice resurrection. But we need to remember that the first people that experienced the joy of resurrection, the encounter, that kind of encounter with Jesus, were women who were simply grieving. They were confused. And what a fitting confusion Mary Magdalene had, because of all the people that she could have mistaken the risen Jesus for, she thinks he is a gardener. A gardener. Of all things, bringing echoes of the first man, the first woman, who were they created to be, to tend to a garden in union with the Creator. Retelling the story of the resurrection of Jesus, now with little children, as a friend of mine was pointing out, House Church, gives us new eyes to see this story and the ability to ask different questions, because we know the facts. Yes, he died, he rose from the dead. But my daughter asks me things like, what will I do when I see Jesus? What will he look like? Will he say my name? Can I go exploring with him? What will his voice sound like? And it forces me to think in this way. They're not childish questions, they're very real questions that put flesh to our hope. Because one day, just like Mary Magdalene did, we are going to see him. And just as he did with her before she had all the answers, he is giving us a commissioning. He's telling us, go and tell others about your encounter, not just about a series of facts and theological statements, but your encounter with the risen Jesus. He is alive. So, just like Mary Magdalene, and each of you has had an encounter with the risen Jesus, and she was commissioned to go run, tell others about it. We're here today to share with you about our own encounter with the risen Jesus. It's nothing special, extremely different. It's just one more of thousands of encounters throughout history. How Jesus has met us throughout the seasons of our walk with him, seasons of great conviction and passion, but also seasons of confusion and grief. And our hope is that you would be able to hear your own story, your own encounter with the risen Savior.
So Pastor Josh has asked us up here for two reasons. One is to kick off Eastertide time, and the second is to, like Paola was just sharing, to share our story and what God has been doing in our life and is doing currently in this moment. So as we speak and share our story, we ask you to see Jesus risen and active, caring, and committed. And we hope that you might be able to see the risen Jesus in your own story, no matter what part of that journey that you're in. There are many, many, many versions of this story. This just happens to be ours and where we're situated, what our family is like, the age that we're at. It varies as widely as there are created beings. Now, many of you know us pretty well and will be familiar with many parts of this story. Actually, our house church said, do we even have to come this Sunday? And I said, you had to. It was required viewing. But if you are newer, or we simply haven't had the chance to get to know you as well, here's our story. So we're going all the way back to college, folks. We met in the fall of 2013 in college, and fast forward 2 years, by August of 2015, got married. Twice. Once in Columbia, and then once here in Greensboro. Our early years of marriage were framed by many things. Those really clumsy years of learning to live with another person and share everything. Simpler times before the chaos of life that really picks up as you take on responsibilities and start building a life together. And paperwork. Lots and lots of visa paperwork for my wife. Where's Morgan? There she is. Yeah, she knows what I'm talking about. It was spiritually marked by a lot as well. We had a deep heart for missions. We sought to go through every single open door that the Lord brought our way, which was not necessarily healthy. It was basically saying yes to everything. A spirit of action, involvement, activity. We became interested in the country of Afghanistan as maybe a destination point for that. We had a massive network of friends from Saudi Arabia, as well as the Muslim community in Dubuque, Iowa, where we were living at the time. And we had this sort of pathway to missions that basically looked like the game of life. So I'm assuming most of you have played the game of life. It's pretty linear. It's pretty simple. You draw cards and you do the things. That's how we thought life was gonna progress. Is you you go from point A to point B, and there's not really any circles in between, and you'll do just fine. Negatively, it was driven by a lot of ambition and doing for the Lord, and the more we could accomplish, the better.
Yes, and then in 2019, our first big shock of reality hits, and we hit an unexpected wall that put an end to our doing. Literally an end, not a slowing down, but an end. I was teaching two different teaching positions in two different universities, and Zack was working for a local publishing ministry. And then one morning, I wake up and I experienced an anxiety that I had never experienced in my life that put me in bed for 3 months, unable to even go back to my job and quit. Zack had to do it for me. It wasn't a slowing down of life, it was a complete halt, like slamming into a brick wall in a train. A little bit after that season, I go down to Colombia to be with my family, and there I discovered one of the most amazing and undeserved blessings from the Lord. We were pregnant. And while neither of us expected this, it was a beautiful affirmation from the Lord that we were seen by Him, that somehow He was still doing something, even though we literally could give Him nothing back. And remember, we were coming from a season of we are going to Afghanistan, of all places. We're ready to do everything we can for Jesus. Now, these years that followed were framed by different things, viewing our faith as more of a walk, formational journey, and less about action items. This is what I do for God. 1, 2, 3, 4. What does it mean? It means that what we are doing for God, yes, is important. Please don't disregard that. But it is second to how we are being formed by God to be more like Christ, not just accomplishing spiritual goals. So the Lord gave us a much deeper focus on the interior life that spills out into the exterior life as a disciple, rather than just accomplishing things for doing, for the exterior life's sake. So this was a time of a lot of healing for us in many ways. We experienced some deep, deep wounds from people that we trusted and that led us. But then it kicked off a season of waiting and preparation. Still trying to do a lot of things on our own. We became parents. As soon as we had our first child, she ended up in the NICU for 2 weeks. We were not sure if she was going to make it, if she was going to live. But in those weeks, we learned a lot about immediate suffering, deep suffering, but how God walked through us with us through that suffering and what it was for, in a way. So slowly, ambition for God, ambition we might think is a good thing, but ambition for God and for doing things for Him was replaced, or I should say transformed more into a desire for faithfulness. So from ambition to faithfulness, what it means to stay connected to God daily, developing holy habits of daily obedience for ordinary, day-to-day, mundane faithfulness. At the end of his time, something happened. We were already here in Greensboro. We had moved from Iowa to here because we thought we're going to be here for maybe a year. Next year, we're headed to Afghanistan with our baby. And in a week, the Taliban takes over the country of Afghanistan. That's it.
We were in the mountains with no cell phone service. So we went into the mountains, And when we came back in a week, the country was overturned.
Needless to say, completely out of our control. Taliban takes over the country, and Afghanistan is out of question. Although we didn't say no immediately, we're still wrestling. Could it mean that we are asked to go to that new Afghanistan? We didn't know, but we were very confused because we had been preparing at this point for like 4 years, and we were ready. A lot of our decisions to make it to this point had to do with that in mind. So we chose what to get, what not to get, where to go, where not to go, based on that vision. So we even decided to move to Greensboro to make this a home base for when we would come back and forth from Afghanistan. The end of the day, none of that happened. But we hadn't really prayed to God. What do you want us to do here in Greensboro? We were just living on default because we were leaving. So that's it. Why put down roots somewhere where we would leave very soon?
So then at the end of, that was in 2021, in the summer of 21. By the end of 21, we had gone through a couple months of praying, Lord, what do you want us to do here? We can't move from, this is still COVID, folks, so a lot is going on. We can't just, which we moved from Iowa with a 2-month-old during COVID. That was a foolish decision, folks. We can't move from our little apartment. We can't just get a new job. I was working for my family's hardware store. Shout out to McKnight Hardware over on Bessemer Avenue. And we don't want to just church shop. We were attending the church that I grew up at. It's actually just down the street. And we love it there. They're still family. And we just saw these 3 options, these 3 main spheres of life. We're living on my family's property, where we still are currently living at the moment, working for the family business, going to the church that I grew up at, because that was the default option. And we realized to make a change, we wanted to make it purposefully, not just because. And we told the Lord that if something was to change, he would have to do it. He'd have to bring it about. And he did. By January, we were here at Emmaus, then United City. We came as unknown people. We bumped into Emmaus by accident, and the Lord really just would not remove that from our hearts. And so we wrapped up things at the church that we were at, where I grew up, and by January we're here. And then through Emmaus, by March, I was working at World Relief Triad, resettling refugees. Shout out to Morgan again in the back. And Grace, even though she's not here. Grace, if you're listening, you were part of that as well. I just walked up to him one Sunday because Spencer, he just said, you should go work at World Relief. He didn't even know me. And he's like, you should go work at World Relief. I'm like, what are you talking about? Who are you? He's like, go talk to those 2 women over there. I was like, I don't know who they are, but I'll go talk to them. They're now some of our best friends. So this is a good story. So this turned into a season of being rooted, learning to settle, not to settle for, but to settle into God and to trust in him. This season is one where we began to feel more of an invitation to explore what calling meant. We had thought it was one particular thing for so long, we never really questioned what it could look like on the day-to-day. We were seeking a way out of the desert that we were feeling we were in, a feeling that was very centered in non-movement, very liminal space, just kind of drifting along, waiting for the Lord to point in the exit direction. During this time, we officially stopped the process towards cross-cultural missions work, which was incredibly painful because that had been the focus of our life for so long. We had been on that journey for years and spent multiple years after Afghanistan still discerning, was this a no to a place, but still to the calling of going overseas, or was this a no to the whole thing? That included even a 2-week vision trip to Japan, where we took our 2 little girls, and we went over there for 2 weeks to do some discerning. We learned what community looked like in this season. Emmaus brought into our lives a much-needed communal element to our practice of spiritual disciplines and our rule, or rhythm as we call it, of life. We had discovered that after the season of anxiety that we really needed a new way of relating to the Lord that was centered in being rather than doing. And we were practicing that kind of on our own. And so that was one of the strongest pulls when we came to United City. Now Emmaus they had a rhythm of life. We have a rhythm of life. And so that communalness really was able to settle on us as something that brought not just healing, but stability and vision and dreaming back into our lives. We learn to embrace a life of holy habits and daily disciplines that lead to that foundation of faithfulness, even though maybe day to day you sometimes don't know where you're going, or maybe you don't have a view of ultimately where you're going. And it's just the moment to moment living of, I don't know what I'm going to be faithful with in 6 years, but I know what I'm going to be faithful with tomorrow or this morning even. However, even though this season, 22 to 25, had so much peace in so many ways, by the end of 24, there was still so many questions as we had closed chapters of what was this 8 to 10 years of our entire marriage? What had it been for? We had been preparing for so long, and now it's just kind of... It's not that there had to be this penultimate next thing or the next career step, so to speak, but there just didn't seem to be any resolution or reasoning to why we were led on the path that we were led on. And we really wondered if we had misheard, which is tough to think about 8 years of mishearing. And we ultimately realized through many, many wise mentors that there was many other people involved in our discernment process all along the way. So yes, maybe you or I can feel like in a moment, did I mishear? But that communalness of being involved in discernment with many, many people in the body that we're in brings that faithful listening that you can lean back on in times of worry.
Which brings us to now. And believe it or not, this one is probably the craziest year of all in some ways. A season of twists and turns and beginning to hear yes from God after so long of thinking, are we just hearing no over and over and over again? So let me tell you the timeline of this year. It is month number what? 4. Okay, this feels like a lifetime ago, but it's been just 4 months. So in January, we come back from a trip to Colombia. We were visiting family. And there I remember in this little coffee shop in Colombia, Bogota, Colombia, we are resolute. We're thinking, Lord, you want us in Greensboro. That's clear. So we're going to go with all the renewed sense of direction. And we are going to set roots deep and be deeply involved in our community here, being parents, doing the little things, simple lives, being faithful, and whatever you bring, God. And then we come, and there's a new government. And literally, the week we come back,
The day
we come back, we learn, oh, by the end of this week, by the way, Zack might not have a job. Without realizing that was the one thing we were counting on for sure. A job, stable job for a family of 5. Please, is it too much to ask, Lord? But we didn't know. So fear, confusion kicks in. Zack tries to make connections, apply to different jobs here, there, everywhere. Zack and Isaac get in a very serious car wreck on the way to preschool. Thankfully, nobody got hurt. They were miraculously spared. But needless to say, our emotions were all over the place, from fear to uncertainty to full-out panic. Lord, where's provision going to come from? Is following you even worth it? We've tried. There's confusion. I cannot do this anymore, God. And I remember clearly saying this prayer. God, I'm not just discouraged, but I'm getting to the point of being disheartened. And that one is different than discouragement. To the point that I don't know what it means to follow you. I thought I was very certain. I thought it was point A, B, C. Here we are. Not quite. And I don't know where to go from here. So please do something, because I do not have one single door to open now. That was it. I even thought, to be quite frank with y'all, you know what, God, just give Zack a job that makes a lot of money and just make us rich. That'd be nice, honest. Not to try to paint this picture of, oh, we're so spiritual, discerning. Like, literally, I thought, you know what, God, just make us rich and we can go to Colombia back and forth. We'll still go to church, we'll serve, I promise. That's where I got to. And then the Lord did something. He did. In March, new beginnings start to flourish, to sprout. Zack is offered a couple contract jobs, again, not a full-time job, nothing that we can hold on to and say that's our source of provision ultimately, but a couple contract jobs, but jobs that are in line with Zack's passions, so very life-giving. Still, even now, he's still working at World Relief in such volatile times, still there. And to top it off, in less than a week, we found a house. And the Lord made a way for that to happen, which I had already tossed out the window for sure with how the situation was.
That was, and the reason she says that is because that was one of our big things this year, was to think about like August. You know, that was one of our prayers with the Lord in that January season, that she means like we, you know, at least we'd have a full-time job. We could maybe look at finally getting our first home, have more of a hospitality environment. So that's why it was so impactful for Paola.
Which, by the way, we just never thought about these things because for 10 years we were thinking, we're leaving. So why buy a house here? Why think of all these things? There's no point. So this was a new muscle to think in this direction. And even the reasoning behind that was so we can be more involved in our community, more space, we can have people over, we can open the doors to our space even more because, you know, if you've been to our apartment, it's like tiny. So confused. But the Lord starts to open doors. Now, it's easy to see these things and think, of course, they've endured so much. It's time for the reward. It's time for the yes. But not necessarily. It's a different season. And it's a season, like I mentioned before, to practice resurrection. What does that mean? To practice resurrection. We are not fully in the fulfillment of that 100% yet, but what does it mean to practice resurrection? To continue daily saying yes to Jesus with our seasons of conviction, but also with all our confusion and unanswered prayers. And with that, He allowed me to do something that for so long I had stopped doing intentionally out of fear of being disappointed, and that was to dream again, to have kingdom dreams again that are now more solid, that have a more solid base, but still propel us forward with the good news that we have a risen Jesus, a risen King. Because what happens when you go through seasons of pain and confusion and doubt, it's easy to go like this and to stay like that for too long. But if you think of the encounter of Mary Magdalene and Jesus, He did this. Mary, you have to look up. There's healing for commission, not feeling for internalizing and only me. So, that is what the resurrection of Jesus makes possible. We probably will have harder seasons ahead. Who are we to think about life experience? Probably, if the Lord gives us more time on this earth, we will have more years. Maybe not. But just like He has done this whole story, He's going to continue to be faithful. And He's going to continue to be faithful in your lives. So we are very thankful for this season of rest and renewal. But in these seasons, whatever the season you're in, when you feel rest and renewal and rebirth, is the most important to remember. Because what happened to the Israelites when they were in better spot? They forgot. And then idolatry crept in and complaining. So this is where you have to remember the most. During resurrection, you remember the faithfulness of God. It won't mean that this season we'll just be kicking back and relaxing. No, because the Lord is certainly asking us to do things, but He has helped us understand how to live out of dependency and not striving. And we still fail every single day, but He continues to teach us. He's still not done with us or with you.
When we first came to Emmaus, we had a really hard time. Not because we did not like it, but because we did like it so much. We were welcomed immediately, and y'all have really become family. Many of you within the first year of the 3 years that we've been here. And we were still planning to go overseas, and we kept telling ourselves, don't commit all the way. Because it would hurt so much more to pull up roots when you leave. Because if you commit and you love these people and you let them love you, you're going to have to leave and maybe go halfway across the world to Japan. But over time, we just couldn't help it. Emmaus is home. It's the first place we felt like we've had a church body that as a family we call our own and as home. The way we're loved, the way our kids are seen and cared for, it's been such a place for and of family. Not that it's only been happy and joyful, but it has always been healthy and wholesome, pointing us towards Jesus in communal rhythms of following him. So when the Lord brought to us an invitation that would point us in a new direction, it was not a very easy decision. Because even though for almost 10 years we thought we would be going to the mission field, we thought this was it. He's planted us here. But during that new season of March, last month, we were asked to join the team at Christ Wesleyan Church, where Pastor Santis, who was just here, is leading. They're in a period of rebuilding and adding in new leadership on top of a very faithful congregation that is going through a period of transition. And he asked me and Paola to join that team. Yep, I knew that was coming. It was an incredibly hard decision, mainly because we weren't looking for anything like this. It wasn't something on our radar. We were done looking abroad and out. We like it here, and we feel at home here. We like kids ministry. We like our worship time. We love that we have good coffee.
Especially then.
Especially that we have good coffee. But with the help of all the leadership here at Emmaus and many, many mentors and friends and family and loved ones, we have discerned that this is something that the Lord is calling and truly asking us to step into. We could say no. We've felt the freedom to say no. But we know that there is an indication that we should say yes. So we will be joining the team there in June, drawing to a close our season at Emmaus for now. We would not be the people that we needed to be for this invitation without our time at Emmaus. You all have marked us in a way that is permanent and impossible to remove. This isn't just some next logical step, like how my younger self would have processed this. It is a very sacrificial yes that takes us out of weekly and rhythmic community with you all. Because even though we'll still be in Greensboro, and I know we will interact both as individuals and as communities, it won't be the same. And that brings a lot of grief. There's a both and. We've learned with goodbyes, good goodbyes, that is always a grief and an excitement and joy. You never get to have both. We thank Pastor Josh for giving us a chance to share our story and this part of it with you all. And there's a beautiful symmetry here that Christ Wesleyan actually helped plant Emmaus back in the day. And now Emmaus is so robust that it's sending back to help bolster what the Lord is doing there. It's a very selfless way of looking at the global church and body that the leadership exemplifies in such a strong way. A way of looking at not hoarding resources for the kingdom of God, but of saying, how do we further his kingdom across this entire nation and world? Or even as small as literally 1 mile down that way. And it's one that I could not be more thankful for, to have as leaders. We love you all so much, and we'll deeply miss the worship, the house church meetings, the potlucks, laughter, and joy that we have from being here. And while this is not a permanent goodbye, it is still very hard to say. And while we're so excited and nervous to see what the Lord does with us going forward, we are so grateful and blessed by what He has done through you all these last 3 years.
Whether you have been here at Emmaus for several years or you recently joined and are trying to find your way to fit into this community, I can tell you from my own experience that if you lean into Jesus and not just into community for the sake of community, you will find here the transformative power of community as you follow Jesus together. Here at Emmaus, I have been challenged to let others see my walk and my interior life. Before I was very external, look good on the outside, but here people have brought it in. And that has made me so much more mature as a disciple in ways that have been crucial to make my faith more genuine and have given me even greater freedom from sin. So as a family, we will miss you all. I've had to say a lot of goodbyes in my life, and I dislike them every time. But I can truly say that we will continue to be family. We're all part of the same body. We all need each other. And we want to leave you with these things, these three things. There are things here that are present at Emmaus. And you see these three as well in all the encounters of Jesus with risen Jesus with his disciples in the early church that are beautifully present here at Emmaus too. And I want to remind you not to take those for granted. One, the centrality of the table. It was literally at house church and this deep commitment to community where we started to be so formed in ways we couldn't have done on our own. Not only the table, hospitality, community, but the Lord's table, the sacrament that we celebrate and remember week after week. Number two, generosity. Being challenged to be generous, to be against the current of this world. And what a beautiful way to practice resurrection, to say, you know what, we have abundance. Even though everything screams lack, 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 like we were singing, we have a good shepherd. We lack nothing. He stays with us through suffering. We can give. Everyone has something to contribute. And creativity. Not just if you sing or if you're artistic. No, that's not what I'm talking about. Yes, there is an element of that. It's amazing if you are creative. But what I mean is putting your gifts, your talents, your abilities, whatever it is, to the service of others. To show God's character, to show who Jesus is, who creatively bow down and wash the feet of the disciples. So continue to seek all those things together, even in seasons of confusion, even in seasons of great conviction, because there's one thing that is certain. You cannot follow Jesus alone. You can't. So continue to pursue those, the table, generosity, creativity. We will miss you. We love you all. And above all, thank you. Because each one of you has made it possible for us today to say yes, not a yes to going across the ocean, but a yes to going across the street. That now is even harder than it was to say yes to Afghanistan 2 years ago, because we have loved you. So believe it or not, this yes is more costly than saying yes to Afghanistan when we had just walked into these doors. We love you.
Thank you guys so much for sharing your story. That was the part where you get to sit awkwardly while we say nice things about you. I do have good news, Zach. There is coffee at Christ Wesleyan, but it's not vignette, bro. It is. I promise you. Oh, man. Um, so I was kind of thinking about this Sunday, knowing this was coming for a while, and thinking about what the two of you have meant to this community. I think there's so many words that could be used, but the one that keeps coming to me is encouragement. I think for both of you and for the two of you, y'all are a power couple. For y'all as a couple, y'all are such a source of encouragement to this community as a whole and to so many individuals within this community. And it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt to lose y'all. Um, I was sharing some with the lead team this week that last week Laura was telling me, you can't let them leave. I'm like, what do you want me to do? I can't make them stay. Nobody wants you guys to leave, man. It's going to hurt. But this is a great opportunity for you guys. And we rejoice with y'all, but also with Christ Wesleyan. And I've told Santise over and over again in our conversations, you guys have no idea what you're getting and getting y'all. So there's a character in the New Testament whose name is Barnabas. I think it's probably his nickname because Barnabas literally means son of encouragement, which I think is a perfect description for both of y'all. And I want to read this. I want to read this passage from Acts chapter 11, verses 22 through 24, which, the Holy Spirit didn't just speak through the word one time, but the Holy Spirit continues to speak fresh insight and fresh revelation through the word. So this passage is about Barnabas 2,000 years ago, but this passage is also about y'all. And as I read this, I want y'all to, especially you guys who know Zack and Paola well, to think about this and tell me that this is not a perfect description of Zack and Paola. So this is in Acts chapter 11. It's talking about the founding of the church in Antioch. And in verse 22, it says, news of this came to the ears of the church in Jerusalem, and they sent Barnabas to Antioch. When he came and he saw the grace of God, he rejoiced, and he exhorted or encouraged them all to remain faithful to the Lord with steadfast devotion. For he was a good man, filled with the Holy Spirit and filled with faith. And through his ministry, a great many people were brought to the Lord. It says further down in that passage, this is something that I didn't realize until just recently, last night, like that recently, where it says it was in Antioch that the disciples were first called Christians. So when we look at the historical roots of Christianity, part of what we find is the personality of Barnabas. That this community that Barnabas helped found and lead in its infancy was the first community that was recognized as Christian. This was the first time that they were called Christians. The two of you have, over these past 3 years, embodied the spirit of encouragement. Not just in the words that you've spoken, though that's true as well, but just in how you've carried yourselves and how you've related to the people and how you've dealt with some of the disappointment that you detailed today. All of that, y'all, and more has been such a source of encouragement to this community. Raise your hand if you've been encouraged by Zack and Paola. Awesome. Even if this is your first Sunday, you were encouraged by them today, sitting up here and sharing their story. So now we get to return the favor. When you're leaving the church today out in the lobby, We have some thank you cards on the, what do we call that? Is that the connection table? Is that what we call it? I should know the name of that table. I've only been a pastor here for 8 months, guys. There are some thank you cards out on the connection table. I want you to grab a thank you card, take it home, fill it out as a means, or grab 2 of them, grab one for each, and bring it back sometime in the next couple of weeks. You guys have 2 or 3 Sundays still with us, right? So bring those cards back so that you can express your gratitude and be a source of encouragement for them as we send them out. One of the cool things here, guys, is that this is part of who we are as a church. This is part of who Emmaus is. We have been blessed by God with a plethora, an abundance of leaders. And we love the leaders that we have here, and we don't want to lose any of them. But we also understand that there are other places that need leaders. And so there are times where we just have to just be generous and be humble and send them with our blessing. And that's what we're doing with Zack and Paola. So at this time, I'm going to invite Pastor Corey to come up, and he's going to lead us in a time of prayer over Zack and Paola.
What's funny this wasn't planned with me and Josh, but I had a passage I was going to read to, and it was out of Acts, and it was talking about Barnabas. So he beat me to it, but I'm going to read it, and then I'm going to kind of go into our time of prayer. But it's Acts 13, verse 2. While they were worshiping the Lord and fasting, the Holy Spirit said, "Set apart for me Barnabas and Saul for the work to which I have called them." Then after fasting and praying, they laid their hands on them and sent them off.